A woman's right to choose includes freedom of religious expression.
Yes, but a woman's freedom of religious expression ends when a life is at stake.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Hello, viewers. Thank you very much for joining us today for our conversation. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am the moderator for today. We have an excellent program for you, and I would like you to meet our panelists.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas. Our congregation is a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
Hi, my name is Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Hello, my name is Mel ROBECK. I'm senior professor of church history and ecumenics and special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I am also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
And now to today's topic. In 1973, the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Roe versus Wade found that the United States Constitution protects a pregnant woman's right to choose to terminate a pregnancy without excessive government restriction. Since then, there has been an ongoing national debate as to what restrictions and regulations should be imposed on the provision of this constitutional right. Some states have sought to restrict a woman's access to abortion care. Most recently, Mississippi's Gestational Age Act, passed in 2018, but blocked by 2 federal courts, allows abortion after 15 weeks, quote, only in medical emergencies or for severe fetal abnormality, end of quote, and has no exception for rape or incest. Texas recently passed a law that bans abortions as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy, before many women know they are pregnant. The statute leaves enforcement of the new restrictions to private citizens who may file lawsuits through the civil court system against people who perform or assist someone in getting an abortion. The law lays out a penalty of at least $10,000 for people or groups who violate the law. Some religious traditions take a hard line in prohibiting abortion in nearly all cases, while other religious traditions allow for the termination of a pregnancy when the mother's health is at risk, including the mother's mental health. Others would argue that the decision to terminate a pregnancy is a moral choice that should be left to women as individuals to make for themselves. As the Supreme Court takes up the question of abortion restrictions, we ask our panel some questions. Firstly, should the state intervene and further restrict access to abortion care? Secondly, how do you balance society's obligation to protect life and freedom between a mother's right to make her own choices with the status of a fetus? And thirdly, does a state that limits access to abortion impinge on the rights to freedom of religious expression? We will turn to those that started our conversation first for their comments.
So one of the reasons why I love the honor of participating in this panel is that we have the privilege of talking about moral questions that are often very difficult, and this is certainly among the most difficult of them. The writer Caitlin Flanagan in February 2019 in The Atlantic magazine wrote about the dilemma of abortion and remembered that her father had taught her to always ask the question, what is the other side's best argument? And no matter where we sit on the question of abortion, whenever you look at the other side's best argument, it pulls very, very hard at your moral heartstrings. So if you look at the fact that prior to Roe versus Wade, it was not uncommon for women to have abortions that were induced with Lysol or other poisons that would cause horrible destruction to the liver and to the kidneys, often fatal. And at the same time, if you look at a sonogram of a 12-week-old fetus, it is so decidedly human looking that it's hard to think of it as others might call it just a batch of cells. And it's because of that that I think that religious freedom is at stake when we restrict abortion, because at the same time that we restrict abortion, I think we also restrict freedom of religious expression. So in Jewish law, for example, there is a lot of history about what is the status of a fetus. If you look in the book of Exodus, chapter 21, it says if two men fight and one accidentally pushes a pregnant woman and the miscarriage results from that, that person isn't liable for murder. That person is liable for a financial reckoning, because there was an agreement in the earliest of the texts that the status of a fetus is just a part of the mother. And similarly, in the Mishnah, the rabbinic writings that came about a couple thousand years ago, the mother's life was to take precedence in all circumstances until literally the head emerged. And in fact, there's a passage in the Mishnah that appeared probably somewhere around the year 200, Mishnah Olot, that says that literally if the mother's life is at stake, you are to cut up the fetus and remove it limb by limb. Now, no one ever did that. But that is an example of rabbinic hyperbole, because they wanted to establish what's called in Jewish law a klal, a general principle. And the general principle is that the rights and the life of the mother take precedence over the rights and the life of the fetus. But at the same time, in Jewish sources, there was also an understanding that a fetus was a potential life and needed protection. So, for example, you are told that you are supposed to violate the laws of the Sabbath to perform a cesarean section and save the life of a fetus if the mother has passed away. You can violate the Sabbath to protect life. And so there was an understanding that that was life. And so you see among the rabbis, even to modern times, a discrepancy of thoughts about when is abortion permitted and when is it not permitted. Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, who was seen as the leading Jewish authority on Jewish medical ethics of the 20th century, allowed for the termination of a pregnancy when even the mother's mental anguish was to be seen almost as life-threatening. And so I raise the challenge and the divisions in Jewish law about this, because someone who wants to practice their Jewish religion and abide by the moral teachings of their religion now can't do that in Texas, because, or other states that restrict abortion, because that is taken away from them. If my rabbi or my moral guide tells me not to do this, and I want to do that in Texas, I can't anymore, because the state has usurped that right for me to make that religious choice. And I think that that's actually state intrusion into free expression.
Thank you.
There are parts of that I think are appropriate. There are parts of it that I disagree with. And I would say, you have to realize where I'm coming from as an Assemblies of God minister, that we take a very conservative position on the subject of abortion. It doesn't mean that abortions don't happen. I believe very strongly that people are going to do whatever people want to do. And that includes the choice to have an abortion. But I look at that and I say, I'm not quite sure that that really works. I mean, it might be the case that it is a national law right now that says abortions are available and can be had at certain levels, Roe versus Wade kind of thing. And it is the case that states such as Texas and others have tried to implement laws that prohibit that sort of thing from certain levels. But we did have a show a couple of weeks ago, or several weeks ago maybe, on freedom and responsibility. We have the freedom to act, that's where the choice is, but we also have the freedom to be responsible for the actions that we take. That's also a choice. So it seems to me we have choices on both sides. You can't say, well, this is a pro-choice, therefore abortion's okay, or this is a pro-choice, or this is not a pro-choice, because we have to be responsible. All of us know how we have babies. And we have choices right from the start. Are we going to engage in a sexual relationship or are we not? And the culture says sexual relationships are good regardless of whether you're at a marital status or whether you're single. It doesn't matter if you're having a sexual relationship with your spouse or with somebody else. It's something that I think inundates people all the time, that we have choices up front that we could take, and the Scripture seems to me, at least from our perspective, the way we interpret it in the Assemblies of God, would be no sexual relationships outside of marriage. Now, within a marriage, there's a different kind of a situation. There may be an issue such as rape or even incest or upcoming disability that we know about, or a medical emergency. That's where we need our ethicists to help us understand the text as it applies to that specific situation. So in the case of all of these issues, we have choices to make, and we have to think seriously about what direction to go. What I understand from Scripture, what we as a community understand as Scripture, is that there may be cases in which it's important to save the life of a mother or to save the life of a fetus, but abortion on the whole is wrong because it is the taking of a life that God has given.
Thank you. Other panelists, comments?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I want to take on the state of Texas. As a Texan, I think Texas has done something amazing in its ridiculous character, to provide for the enforcement mechanism to be for private citizens, any private citizens from anywhere, no matter how many of them pile on to do it, to enforce Texas legislature's current understanding of what's right and wrong, places in jeopardy every constitutional right that we have. Another state might choose to say, in a time like 2002 or 2003, that Islam and those who practice it are dangerous, and that anyone who sees somebody practicing Islam, if I see somebody practicing Islam, I can file suit against them, and my wife, after I've filed suit, can file another suit, and my friend, who is anti-Muslim, can file suit, or another state might say that we really don't believe in the Second Amendment, and anybody carrying any sort of weapon, any sort of firearm that's not in the military, can be sued by whoever sees them carrying it. Private enforcement of laws in this way places bounties on the practice of a constitutional right, and abortion remains a constitutional right in this country. The same could be done for a state that's against Methodists at some point or other, or against Catholics at some point or other, and those who see folks going in for Mass on a Sunday morning, you can pick up a bounty of $10,000 apiece by suing those folks, because Catholicism is bad and wrong, and we want to get rid of it. The enforcement mechanism of what Texas has done is ridiculous, and the scary thing is that so many who have sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, all of those in the Texas legislature who voted for this thing, decided that it was okay to do that.
Thank you. Carl.
Thank you. Tom, I totally agree with what you're saying there about the law, and that's deeply troubling. And I think that, of course, I want to shift and pivot back away from the law, specifically to the moral question of abortion, just because I would hope that our moral thinking through the issue would help shape the law, and I know people are still going to do the opposite. And I think to begin, it says Lutheran, I know, on the program always. So Lutherans are deeply divided over this issue. Some reflect probably very much a Roman Catholic point of view, which would be condemn all abortions except to save the mother's life. And then the others would be fully pro-choice in our cultural discussion. Where I'm at is that I honestly have struggled with this issue for my whole life. I was pretty conservative on this issue, meaning that I was probably I was involved in pro-life organizations and believe that life began at conception. I think, Dan, you started out by saying, consider what are the best arguments on the other side. I mean, what are the strong arguments? And so I started really wrestling with, well, what are those? And I'm just going to go through where I was at personally. And that is that I said, okay, if life begins at conception, then that would mean that any kind of abortion is a first-degree murder. And the fact that no one is arguing that women who have abortion should be executed, to me the logic would be then you have to suggest that a person who commits an abortion should be executed, particularly in Texas, right? Because we have the death penalty. And I'm thinking, that is so, that morally just, I'm repelled by that. And it made me realize that I do believe that the status of the fetus actually is different. That's why I'm morally repelled by that thought, because the status of the fetus is different than the status of someone who is outside the womb, which then made me say, well, what is the status of the fetus? And I realized that, you can talk, people talk about biology as if it's this factual thing, and it is, but that doesn't decide about what the status of that fetus is, meaning you can talk about the development, but if we talk about death being, let's say death is brain death. Well, if it's brain death, why don't we have the beginning of life as the beginning of brain waves? I mean, to me, that would be the logic of it. Or if breath is when we become, right when we die, when we lose our breath, then how about the beginning of breath being the beginning of life? And I realized, well, that would put that life beginning very late in this development. I mean, to birth, right? Virtually. Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think that it's because of the wrestling, Carl, that you're sort of demonstrating that these questions need to be left to the conscience and the moral practice of the person who is carrying that fetus. And I might say, as a religious leader to people who come to me for advice, only in these very, very, very narrow circumstances should you terminate a pregnancy, based on my reading of what Jewish moral teaching might suggest. But that's a guidance that I can give. And I think because I'm not the one carrying, I'm not the one who's physically being imposed upon to carry that, that potential life to fruition, that I should be able to declare. One of the things, Mel, that I would say is, you were talking about, the status, whether someone's in a marriage or not in a marriage. There's lots of times when someone is in a marriage relationship where it would be dangerous to carry a child. If someone has a chronic illness, if someone has diabetes, if someone is in an abusive relationship and becomes pregnant, even in a marital context, there may be lots of reasons why, for mental anguish or physical anguish, it would be unsafe for a mother to continue a pregnancy.
Or if the child has disabilities that everyone recognizes, the doctor included, that at birth, the child will not survive long at all. There's got to be a way to go ahead and relieve the parents of that anguish.
We must have a break there. Thank you all very much. So let's have a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back, viewers, and to a very complex and difficult topic. I think we're only beginning to scratch the surface of some of the complexity, and we're already moving into concluding arguments, concluding statements, but let's do that.
Thank you. I want to repeat something sort of like what Carl spoke about with Lutherans. Disciples of Christ are all over the place on this as well, and I would not dare to speak for them on anything, much less something as profoundly important as this. But I personally believe that, as the rabbi said, religious rights are at stake in this argument. I may not agree with someone's religious position, but that does not that's what the First Amendment religion clauses are all about. We don't establish one religious belief over against another as superior, nor do we allow people, nor do we disallow people to exercise their religious beliefs and freedoms.
I sometimes feel like abortion is sometimes presented as a moral good, and I think it's comparable more like divorce. It's always something that's tragic and would be moral. It isn't as if someone stands up, I'm for abortion, right? In that sense, I hope it's rare. But I do also hope that it's safe for this reason. I think where I've come down, and this is my personal comment here, I'm not speaking for any church body, where I'm at personally is that I believe that the earlier in the development of the fetus, to do an artificial number, the first trimester, it certainly, to me, seems to be best to leave it in the realm of private decision of a mother wrestling with the issue of abortion. And as we move into the second and third trimester, I understand a deeper sense of the state having an interest in the fetus and its viability and those kinds of questions. And so even as we move late in trimester, I would have strong opposition to a kind of abortion. But that's just where I'm at personally on that continuum. I just don't think it's a yes, no, black or white. It's a continuum.
Thank you.
I think, to be quite honest with you, that it comes back to what your original choice is. You have the ability to be self-controlled. And our culture says that's not necessary. You can do pretty much what you want to do. If it feels good, do it. You've heard that kind of thing. I'm not arguing, I think, that all abortion is wrong. I agree with you. It is a tragic thing no matter what happens. But there are circumstances, I think, and an abusive relationship is a place where the question arises. I once knew a Catholic bishop who gave up his position as a bishop, resigned from that, over the issue of birth control, when he found that there were too many women that he had to deal with who had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kids and had no ability to take care of them. The only thing he could think of doing was quitting because he couldn't support the doctrine that said no birth control. And so I think we have some very difficult decisions to make about this. But the reality is, we've been told no sex outside of marriage is a good thing. None of it. We make those choices. When we make those choices, then we have consequences that follow.
So I was blessed to be present at the birth of my 3 children and to see the awesome, miraculous nature of what it is to see new life come into the world and to watch as my wife was literally a partner in the creation of a human being. And that partnership is sacred and holy. And what makes anything sacred and holy is our freedom to decide to be in that partnership. And when that freedom is removed from us, we lose our capacity to be moral agents. And it dehumanizes. And so I think that I know lots and lots of people who have children that they might call an unexpected blessing. Where even though they were practicing family planning and everything else, still things that are 96% leave 4% possibilities. That unexpected blessing for a lot of people is not always a blessing. And I think it's really important because there is such a discrepancy in the way that brilliant religious minds look at this, that we need to allow space in our society for those religious teachings to guide us. So I look in Jewish law and I look at those that have a very restrictive look at abortion, and they are absolute geniuses in their understanding of Jewish law. And I look at those that have a more permissive look, and they are just as smart. And so when I think about what I would want for women to be able to do who practice my tradition, is to be guided by those who they feel are most compelling. That's what free religious expression is about. And those are freedoms that I think the state really can't limit.
Well, what a great conversation. Thank you all very much. We ranged over a number of topics. One of the things that stays with me is, I think we all agree on, is, first of all, the sanctity and beauty of human life. That is what drives, I think, all of us in our relationships, in birth and so on. And politics will come into this, but I think we have to maintain some of that sense of that sanctity. Let's close. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestant Jews, educators and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory but in reality. And now, friends, until next week, at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned, and may the God of all of ours bless all of you.